Are you a L.I.V.E teacher? A L.I.V.E teacher is someone who never stops learning.
We know that highly efficacious, efficient, and effective educators expect their students to succeed.
Yes, y'all. Watch out!
L.I.V.E, highly efficacious, effective, and efficient educators, is a series of 22 live lessons that focus on different areas of teacher efficacy, advocacy, and support.
L.I.V.E teacher brings fun into the classroom.
L.I.V.E teachers bring excitement to the classroom.
They welcome change into their classroom. They are masters of the subject and the content that they teach. And most importantly, they never stop learning. So again, I ask, are you a L.I.V.E teacher?
We're excited that you can join us and stay tuned for our upcoming L.I.V.E lessons. And we look forward to learning and growing with you. Thank you.
Yeah, come on. I like that, y'all. The H, the E, the H, the H, the E, the H, the E, the H, the H, the E, I like that, like that. The H, the E, H, E, H, E, Heck yeah. Yes, y'all. Watch out. H-E-Y.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I am Keishla Wiley bringing you greetings from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to L.I.V.E Summer Learning Series, where our goal is to inform, empower, and encourage educators, families, and all those that hold a stake in education. Whether this is your first time joining us or you've attended other sessions, we want to thank you for your presence tonight. Thank you for your participation. And Lavetta, tag your it.
Hello, I'm Lavetta Levels, and I'm hailing from Dallas, Texas. Let me give a shout out to all the Texans that are watching. I see you in the comments. Everyone, please go ahead. Tell us where you're watching us from. Florida, I see you. New Jersey, Connecticut, of course, Baltimore. Hey, shout out to my Baltimore family. I can do that. Hey, Dean family in Baltimore. Shout out to Dr. Goffney. I see you, Dr. Goffney, Superintendent of the Year down in Aldine ISD, and her crew. Glad to have you here. Isis, tag your it.
Hello, everyone. I am Isis Fan, bringing you greetings from Moncks Corner, South Carolina. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And tag Simone, you are it.
Hey everybody, how is everybody doing tonight? I am Simone Walden. I am from North Carolina, but I live in Maryland. It is exciting. Today, Isis reminded us that this is our 1 month old anniversary of He-Live, and Principal Kafele was our very first guest, and we see you, Principal Kafele. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. How are you doing? So listen, tonight is very, very special to me because I get to introduce and to listen to my CEO, my superintendent, the one and only Dr. Monica Goldson. So I'm going to introduce you. I'm going to read her bio, then we're going to bring her in. So stay tuned. Share this with your friends. Share this with your family. Parents, if you're concerned, tune in. Teachers, educators, tune in tonight. So Dr. Monica E. Goldson is the Chief Executive Officer for Prince George's County Public Schools. We are PGCPS proud. She previously served as Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, where she led a team that supports schools in the areas of curriculum and instruction, special education, testing, college and career readiness, and student services. A product of the county schools, Dr. Goldson has spent her entire 27-year career in PGCPS, steadily climbing the ranks from the classroom to district leadership. She began her career at Suitland High School with long-term plans to become an actuary. Within weeks, she knew that education was her true calling. 2 years later, she was promoted to mathematics instructional specialist, where she provided assistance to targeted schools across the system. She also observed and assisted more than 200 secondary teachers with classroom instruction. Dr. Goldson later served as assistant principal for Forestville and Frederick Douglass High School and principal of Frederick Douglass and Dr. Henry A. Wise Jr. High Schools. As the founding principal at Wise, she partnered with Prince George's County Community College to launch a dual enrollment program and oversaw a 182-point increase in SAT scores. As associate superintendent for high schools, Dr. Goldson worked to increase principals' leadership capacity and help develop action plans to improve student achievement while monitoring more than $5 million in federal grants. Dr. Goldson believes in creating experiences that propel students to their highest levels of excellence. She increased student access to dual enrollment college credit years before state legislation granted free access to such programs. As Chief Operating Officer, she managed many divisions and offices, including student services, informational technology, supporting services, business management, and people accounting and student boundaries. Dr. Goldson currently sits on the board of directors for nonprofit Prince George's. She is a member of Leadership Greater Washington and serves as an adjunct professor at the George Washington University, Howard University, and Morgan State University. A 3-time graduate of historically Black colleges and universities, Dr. Goldson holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Florida A&M University, a master's degree in elementary and secondary school administration from Bowie State University, and a doctoral in education administration and policy from Howard University. She is a proud parent of 2 sons, a student at Savannah College of Arts and Designs, and another who attends Oxon Hill High School. So He-Live team and audience, let's give a great big welcome to Dr. Monica Goldson.
Thank you.
Hey, how are you? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. He-Live team, you all are amazing.
Thank you so much
for having you here.
So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So what we'll do is we'll let you start your presentation, and then Isis will come back on and introduce our other superintendent, Dr. Santelises, once you are finished, okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
So before we begin, I do want to say thank you to Ms. Walden, who is one of our amazing teachers. I have the honor of representing 10,000 teachers, 22,000 employees in Prince George's County Public Schools. Give a shout out first to all those from Maryland who have joined. I see you in the live chat. And for those across the United States who are joining us for a conversation with two African American superintendents in the state of Maryland. So we are going to take you for a ride on our experience. Before I begin, I wanted to give you some demographics about Prince George's County Public Schools so that you'd have a context of the discussion that we're going to have today. So for us, Prince George's County Public Schools is the 25th largest school district in the United States. I have over a $2 billion budget, 206 schools, 135,000 students. As I said, 22,000 employees, because I include our substitutes in the number of employees because I count them as part of this village. And I represent more than 91% children of color. We are a school district that has 60% of our students who are on free and reduced meals. I am a product of the same school system that I have the opportunity to lead. I went to elementary, middle, and high school here. As you heard, I went to Florida A&M when I left because I'm an only child and wanted to get away from home. But as God would have it, came right on back. And this is now year 29 in education. Of course, this year I have seen way more than I thought I would with COVID-19, but still honored to lead a community that I live in and that I have been committed to for so very long. We started this conversation around equity in 2017 with a small task force of 10 people, board members and some internal stakeholders within the organization, because we knew we needed to have a true, honest conversation about what equity meant. You can be a district that is predominantly representing children of color and still not have actions that represent you have the ability to make sure that you've leveled that playing field. So we began that work in 2017, 3 years ago, and from that work came up with our own definition of equity. So it's so important to know that there's a Webster's definition, and in each district, I feel like in order to move that work, you've got to find the definition that best fits your work and that's going to help to move the work forward to create an equitable playing field. So I thought we'd start today's conversation with that definition that our Board of Education has adopted and our employees as well. And you can read, so I don't need to read for you. But for us, we looked at a definition of educational equity that helped to provide adequate resources that would bridge every gap that we thought existed, whether it was through socioeconomic background, language, special needs, and making sure that we provide the best and the highest quality of education possible. So I want you to know, you can take that definition down. I can tell you through COVID-19, that definition was tested and tried 5 times over. In March 13th, to be exact, I learned that our schools would be closing for 2 weeks at the same time everyone else did in our district by the television, because our governor decided to announce it without the foresight of letting the other local education agencies and superintendents know. And literally we found out on a Thursday, and on that Friday, literally had to shut down at that time what we thought would be 2 weeks. We're just going to sanitize buildings and come back in 2 weeks. And quickly that 2 weeks changed into what ended up being what feels like eternity, but went from March until the last day of school on June 17th. And we quickly had to galvanize and find ways to support our families and make sure that whatever decision we made around the delivery of instruction helped to level that playing field and created true action from the definition that you saw before. So quickly, we had to our very first thing was we had to figure out how to feed our children. Because as I stated before, 60% of our children are on free and reduced meals. And so for us, we had to quickly say, how can we still feed them during the pandemic? And what we thought were 2 weeks. Okay, we can feed them for 2 weeks. So we started out on day one with 9 centers out of 206. Clearly that was unreasonable. And ended up in a short week ramping that up to 39 sites quickly. And then before we concluded by June, we had ramped it up to 49 sites. We delivered close to 500,000 meals from March to June to any family that came to any of those sites to get a meal. We didn't ask questions. All they had to do was say, hey, I needed a meal. And we gave it to children. We then realized that, okay, we're going to be in this for a minute, and we're going to still have to do some learning. And so we were not a one-to-one school district, meaning that we did not have a device for every child. But we were close. We thought we had enough technology for 80% of our students. But if you're truly a district that's trying to level that playing field, you got to have it for 100%. And so I worked with my county exec to say, can I go out publicly to ask our families to support us? And parents, people were asking if there were ways that they could help. And I told them, parents, this is how you can help. If you have a device, allow your child to use it. So that helps me to serve those who do not. And we were able to distribute 60,000 laptops over 2 days so that we could make sure that every family who needed a computer could get one. No questions asked, not free and reduced meals. Literally, you need it, come get it. And they did. But then we also, as we were doing that, we knew that you could have a computer. It don't mean nothing if you cut that computer on and you don't have access to Wi-Fi and a platform. And this was, to me, I think, the beginning of the true test of whether our Board of Education truly believed in the definition of equity. Because what that meant for me is that I needed to shift $2 million from our operating budget to pay for some of our families' Wi-Fi bills. And in order to do that, that meant that my board would have to go along with the decision that we had to make to streamline some of our resources to make sure that we supported families. And when I went to them in a closed session and explained what needed to be done, they did not hesitate. I was prepared to go through our task force report to give them the 20 recommendations they had come up with 3 years ago. But luckily, they had seen enough to know that this is the time where educators step up. And we have shown now our community on a regular basis that education is now that safety net. And so I am grateful for the ability for them to quickly stand behind me to reshift that $2 million. We are paying for Wi-Fi for not only families for free and reduced meals, but for those who just said, hey, I can't make ends meet now because I don't have a job and I need to make sure that my child still has internet access. We then purchased hotspots and distributed Wi-Fi hotspots. We put towers on all 206 of our schools so that if a person needed access, they could drive up and do their work in the car because they'd have free Wi-Fi access from our buildings. So we quickly had to ramp up so that we could truly say we were a district that was making sure that there was access for all. Once we did that, then we, of course, had to change teaching and learning from the traditional way to distance learning. And even still, with the distribution of 60,000 laptops and a purchase of 5,000 hotspots and paying families' bills, I still did not feel like I had everyone online. Because remember, I have 136,000 homes, and what we were able to do is to look to see how many were signing in on our platform, and could see that we had 80,000 of our families who were signing on remotely. So then we began to do lessons on our public television station because we knew everyone has a TV, and it was basic cable. You didn't have to have HBO, Showtime, any of that. So we did lessons daily for our pre-K to grade 5 students. And believe it or not, that drew in many of our private school families who had somehow been left out from their own private school experience. So it went a long way in terms of serving our community. And at all of our meal distribution sites, we provided enrichment packets every 2 weeks that were updated so that our community members and our students who wanted to continue to advance in their work, or those who still had situations where they couldn't get online, couldn't get on TV, there was no excuse where we couldn't connect to learning, we provided that access through the distribution sites as well. And then you could download those lessons home if you so needed to. We tried to close every gap that we could think of that exists. And every time it was almost like the game Walk 'em All, where you use the plug, you bang one head down and the next one comes up. Every time that happened, our team galvanized to come up with ways to support families. What we did find over time is that what gap existed, no matter the social economic background or where you live, there was an emotional gap, that the toll of COVID-19 was now rearing its ugly head into our community of people of color. And we're still evolving in that. One of the commitments I made when coming into this role was that in my 4-year tenure, my goal was to have a mental health provider in all of our schools by the time this 4-year time was up. At the beginning of next school year, we'll have up to 80 schools that have that. But in the meantime, with us not accessing schools, what we had to do was to now provide platforms, virtual platforms, and places for people to get that emotional help that they needed. I found that it was taking a toll on my building principals. It was taking a toll on teachers. I had to quickly go to our mental health providers and our health providers to say, I need something for my teachers and adults. But in our weekly newsletter to parents, I also need tips for them because they were getting at wit's end. So if you're a parent of young kids, you're trying to work, you're trying to manage your own kids, and they want to know why they can't go to school. You trying to figure out why they can't go because you felt like you needed a break. But we also wanted to provide that mental support for families. We're still getting through that process. Honestly, I don't want to paint a picture as if it's perfect. As I said before, every time you think you have something solved, something else pops up. But when you're committed to children and you're committed to making sure that the gap for children of color does not continue to widen, you will do the Malcolm X, which is by any means necessary. And so that is what we did. We did everything we could and continue to do to make sure that we close that gap. We have a team that's already now trying to figure out what that opening of school will look like. And probably for superintendents across this nation is a difficult decision for all of us to make. I can tell you, I probably could count on my hand how many superintendents will be who have a love and care and concern for children will follow number 45 who made comments yesterday. Because it's impossible to do just that when you have to balance academics and health and safety. But for us, what you don't want to do is to cause an even greater gap. And so what we have to do is, as leaders of our districts, take the non-traditional, because we all know that being in front of people and the relationship building is so important. But there is still some value in distance learning. To the surprise of many people, we are offering a free summer school virtual from July 1 until July 31st, just a month. And initially when I presented this plan and said, hey, we're just going to do it for the summer, what I don't want to do is leave this gap to be widened even more. And what I found is that families soaked it up and needed it. I have 36,000 middle school students who are in our summer learning program, in an individualized learning program where they literally do a diagnostic, take them where they are in reading, language arts, and mathematics, and work through and progress through the content, preparing them for their next grade, and conclude that on July 31st. And then I have 11,000 high school students who are taking credit recovery courses. And of those 11,000, 1,100 of them are taking original credit courses. And so what this has done is has now shown our our very traditional community that our children have embraced the online learning process. It's us. We are the ones who have to figure out how to embrace the new way of learning. And I can tell you, a parent of two older students, one who just graduated from high school and one who just graduated from college, you know, distance learning for me, I'm like, oh, I can't imagine that they're on the computer all day. But believe it or not, they're on the computer all day anyway. They're on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and everything else you could think of. And so we had to figure out a way to begin to close that gap. What we do have to work on for my district, because I want to be very clear, I said this before, we're not perfect, is closing the gap for our ELL learners, our Latinx students. And so for us, we have used many of our nonprofit organizations that specialize in contacting and getting close to our Latinx community. We are very close to Washington, D.C., right outside of DC. In some cases, you could literally walk across the street, be in Prince George's County and walk across the street and be in the District of Columbia. And so for my Latinx community, we first have to establish trust, because what they hear every day, unfortunately, in the media, is a government that wants to send them somewhere, or they're frightened by what providing information, like contact information, means. If they give us contact information, are we sharing it with somebody who's going to come and try and find them? And so we first had to bridge a level of trust so that they know that we're in this together and we won't give their information out. And so we do that many times through what we have in many of our schools with large Latinx population, a parent liaison who also speaks Spanish, who helps to bridge that gap in our nonprofit organizations. I'm not proud of this, but we had 4% of our students who during the pandemic, we could not get in touch with. And that was when I reached out to my nonprofit to say, I need your help. I need you to knock on doors. I need you to get in touch with some students through the gaming system. And when they're on, say, hey, we're looking for Johnny. And when you find, and tell Johnny we're looking for him. And when they got in touch with them, hey, we're not here to hurt. We're here to just find out where you are. What can we do to support you? And what can we give you to make sure that you feel connected and part of the learning community? And so I can tell you that's the hardest piece that we have had to work through. And the piece of, in absence, making sure that our children are not harmed in that absence. And the numbers for child abuse and neglect have gone down, but it doesn't mean that it does not exist. It means that our students are home every day and unable to report. And so we're very cognizant of that. And I try to instill that in my building leaders, the 206 soldiers that are walking this journey with me, my principals, to say, when you don't see kids, take that as a sign, not that they're absent. It's up to you to find out where they are and why. And to do, initially, I can tell you when we first started out, folks were scared to do home visits because they were concerned about what the virus, and every day, was something new about the virus. But eventually we got to a point where they were like, look, I'm going to go to the home to find out where they are because it's settling to me. And honestly, what I ask our staff to do, I do myself. So when they're out distributing laptops, hotspots, meals, I'm there too. Because I would never ask them to do something I would not be willing to do myself. And so that has been our journey. We are continuing to knock down barriers through not just COVID-19, but now outside of this, and what will the new norm look like? And what are ways that we can create an equitable playing field? We have a large number of students who do dual enrollment. And, when we first started out in this journey, this COVID-19 journey, I can be honest with you, I was livid with the College Board when they made a decision to do advanced placement assessments online. And I worked extremely hard to get to speak to the person at the top so I could tell them about themselves and how much they clearly didn't understand the people that they service. Because what you can't do is put an assessment online and not know that a lot of the people who are paying for the assessment don't have access to technology. And so that to me was called privilege. You made a decision based on your own privilege and not looking at the people that you serve. I mean, I was so livid. I thought, if I could pull every dollar I put in the College Board, I would. But instead of doing that, I have made a commitment to bringing them to a level of understanding how you serve children of color, that you don't sit and make decisions without talking to leaders of districts that support predominantly children of color and what you can do to support them and helping them. So to think that they could take an assessment on their phone because you believe that every child has a phone is how you're going to close that gap is concerning. And so instead of taking a dollar away from them, I'm going to still give them their dollar because I pay for advanced placement assessments for our students and paid for all of our juniors in the school district to take the SAT because I don't want any kid to have a reason why they can't. And so instead of taking that dollar away and taking the experience of every junior taking the SAT away, I'm going to lead them to that dollar and help them to understand why they have to make decisions that are better for children of color. So, there's a saying that if you don't have a seat at the table, bring your own folding chair. I plan to bring my folding chair with the legs propped up and stay until they figure it out. So that has been part of our journey. I know that I am with some amazing leaders who believe the same. I can see your chats. I'm a multitasker, so I can see your comments in the chat. You wouldn't be on this platform and listening if you were not an advocate for change. If you did not figure out how to close the gap for your children, and if you did not believe in equity, you would not be a part of this conversation and trying to find ways that I'm sure have not even been discovered and tapped into, because you are too walking this journey with us and our future leaders as well. So I thank you for the opportunity. I know you'll see Sonia soon, and we'll come back together.
Dr. Goldson, I could just listen to you and just learn and glean from you. First of all, let me thank you because it is obvious, not by your talk, but by your walk, that you lead from your heart. It is obvious. It is crystal clear that you are not only concerned about your children, but you're also concerned about your community, your parents, and most importantly, your staff. One thing that I'm hearing a lot now, teachers are saying, no one has asked us, they are not including us. And so kudos to you and your district. I did see that you all had an opportunity for teachers to actually give some voice and participate in the survey. And you had great participation, some of the highest participation I've seen on the surveys. And so thank you for leading that district. And you are a leader of leaders. So there are a lot, like you said, I'm looking at all the people in here. I see a lot of my mentors are here. So shout out to everybody. I can't call everyone's names. Thank you all for listening. And there are a lot of college students that are working on their doctorate degrees, their superintendent certification, and they're all here and they are taking notes from you. And so we're so excited to have you here. But as she stated, we have another guest with us. And so I'm so proud because on this day, July the 9th of 2019, I had an opportunity to meet Dr. Sonia Santelises. And who knew exactly 365 days later, we'd be together here in the L.I.V.E Summer Learning Series. Isis is going to come up and she's going to introduce Dr. Santelises.
Awesome, guys. So looking over this bio, you guys are in for a treat. She has been leading since I've been born. So I am super excited to introduce her and to bring her in so that she can share some information with you. Dr. Sonia Santelises has spent nearly 30 years focused on building high quality teaching and learning to help students excel, including her tenure as Chief Academic Officer for Baltimore City Public Schools from 2010 to 2013. She returned to city schools after serving for 3 years as Vice President for K-12 Policy and Practice at the Education Trust in Washington, D.C. Dr. Santelises first came to city schools from Boston, where she was Assistant Superintendent for pilot schools. She has also served as Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning Professional Development in Boston. Dr. Santelises lectured on urban education for 2 years at Harvard University. She is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Brown University and holds a Master's of Arts degree in Education Administration from Columbia University and a Doctor of Education in Administration, Planning, and Social Policy from Harvard University. Dr. Santelises was named Chief Executive Officer of Baltimore City Public Schools effective July 1 of 2016. Everybody, please join me in welcoming Dr. Santelises to the show. Good evening, good evening.
Good evening, Isis. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
Very good. It's good to see you. Good to be back, see some familiar faces. And I will tell you, being able to be here tonight and hear my fellow colleague, fellow superintendent and friend, Dr. Monica Goldson, was as big a treat as anything. As a matter of fact, I had to say, wait a minute. Oh, that's right. I actually have to go because I was in what she was saying, which was wonderful. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. So the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So it's wonderful to be here with you all tonight. Greetings from Baltimore City. And really, again, you know, it's hard but helpful following Dr. Goldson, or Monica as I call her when I have to text her and ask her a question, because she really did hit on so many points that are true across so many communities and schools, and some of the key decisions that those of us who proudly serve do that. I had the privilege, and I consider it a privilege, to re-enter Baltimore City Schools as Chief Executive Officer in 2016. Our city was still reeling from a lot of at that time, the latest uprising that the city had experienced due to frankly, the death of Freddie Gray in police custody. And just how ironic it is that now 4 years later, in the middle of a pandemic, we have some of the same, frankly, eruption that has occurred across the country. And so the convergence of both an incredibly unprecedented, once in a century health challenge at the same time that we had an eruption of racial violence that has spawned a nation's protest, I think really has made this a unique time to lead. It's made it a challenging time to lead. But I think as Dr. Goldson described earlier, for those of us who have made a career in serving communities that have been traditionally underserved and historically underserved, the last 3 months have really just been a crucible experience, right? Where a lot of factors that were already in play are now in a pressure cooker and are forcing us to respond and deal with, as a nation and as leaders, a lot of what has been in play for a long time. So when I came back to Baltimore City in 2016, some of the first months back in the city, we actually, I actually took my school leaders through a history of redlining in Baltimore City. We had Undesign the Red Line come as kind of a historical display, but we situated our work in education within a larger historical frame that was very prominently tied to redlining in the city as it pertained to housing. But we really were pushing ourselves. And I remember asking the question, okay, we had redlining in Baltimore City with regard to housing and got a lot of nods. Oh yeah, Doc, we got a lot of redlining in Baltimore City. It wasn't that horrible. But then when I turned the question to what about redlining in education, then things got a little quiet. And people were like, well, what do we mean? And I think part of what we mean, as Dr. Goldson said, even in predominantly African-American communities, we have not escaped the legacy of some of that kind of systematic underserving of Black and Brown communities. And so part of that work began with an equity frame that was situated in things did not just happen overnight. And so they're not going to just change overnight. And so the approach was, how do we begin to look at the work that we do in education through a lens of actually disrupting and redesigning a system that in many cases, some would argue is doing in part what it will do in terms of replicating inequality unless we consciously, deliberately, and relentlessly push on those elements of the system that frankly structure the inequitable achievement that not just Baltimore City or Prince George's County is experiencing, but basically we as a nation are encountering. So a lot of that early work really was looking at maps of our city and seeing where are particular programs, where are there access to gifted and talented and accelerated learning. And what did we learn? Actually, in every zip code in Baltimore City, there are young people that are ready for that level of work. We also realized that we needed curriculum that signaled to young people, to families, that they were able to, frankly, engage in the kind of learning that we know leads to greater options. And so in the midst of that work, in the midst of really pushing on what is the quality of the opportunities we are experiencing, getting some initial gains, making sure that every high school, not just select high schools, not just the ones with entrance criteria, but all high schools in Baltimore City are preparing young people with the kind of career programming, college readiness programming that we know leads to true, what I call family sustaining incomes and lifestyles. But in the midst of all of this, as Dr. Goldson described, March 13th happens, and lo and behold, we find ourselves in a very different place. And I remember being in Cambridge at a meeting. At that time, I was doing some visiting committee work at Harvard. I remember in the middle of that, the dean of the school came in and said, this COVID thing, and this was in the middle of February, this COVID thing is going to get out of control. And so part of what began even then was this immediate action and reflection on what are we going to do to make sure that our most vulnerable families, our most underserved communities are not yet again caught off balance. And so we began some work then, but as Monica, I think, so powerfully described, and I remember texting her at times during that period, we had to very quickly put things in place for our families, a lot of which reflected some of the same priorities. You know, we know already Baltimore City had for at least the last 3 or 4 years had made sure that, for example, we prioritized offering dinner to our families. And we had made great progress in reducing child hunger through our school feeding programs. So it was no surprise to us that one of the many functions we were going to have to play was making sure that we had meals up and going for our families almost immediately. And that bore out. I think it bore out across the state and across the country. The other decision we had to make was an ethical decision very early. And that is that federal school nutrition, lunch and nutrition programs do not pay for adult meals. And in consultation with my board, we made the decision that we were going to assume the cost of adult meals. And part of that came from time that I spent in the community, and I am watching grandmothers and aunties and uncles bring their students to schools to receive meals. And how in the world am I going to turn down a grandmother who has walked 7 blocks and oftentimes labored blocks, and then sit and watch her not get a meal while we were feeding children? And one of the things that this is highlighted, that I've talked about even at the federal level, is the way that we serve our families is broken. We compartmentalize. You can't feed children and then act as if the adults in the household are going to magically take care of themselves. That's not going to happen. And so we had to, and to, the tune of $200,000 or $300,000, we assumed that cost. Very fortunately for us, we had members of the philanthropic community, all the way to everyday citizens who would contribute $50, $75, whatever they had, to make sure that we, even though we weren't going to be reimbursed, we had to make sure that whole families were kept together. Similarly to Dr. Goldson, we too were a living example of the digital divide. We too had to really up the emergency purchase of devices for families, and very much the access to high-speed internet is still an ongoing factor. And one of the places that is a continued point of advocacy is around access to broadband. And I had to say to a group of philanthropic leaders just last week, like, it is fine if you have a Dr. Monica Goldson or a Sonia Santelises who is out here kind of beating the pavement with Comcast and everything else, but really and truly, should that be our role? Or are we as a community going to say that it is not acceptable for some families, some students to have access? And by access, I mean not having a 16-year-old have to get in their car and sit in our parking lot and try to do a full paper on a cell phone. That is not equity. That is still patching together for some people's children, while other people's children, right, get the full complement of what we know is needed to be successful. So very similarly, we did a lot of that work. These are issues today that I think we really have got to continue as a community to push for. And it is not just the school's responsibility, but we have mobilization from some of our parents. Even our students are mobilizing and putting pressure on elected officials. And we have to continue that. Another piece that I'd like to talk about is the fact that we really did ask educators, and I think Dr. Goldson really referenced this so beautifully. We asked educators in so many cases to turn on a dime in a matter of a week or two from one form of teaching to another. We went in Baltimore City, we went from a 1-to-4 ratio of device to student to then having to make massive purchases of Chromebooks. So we had close to 25,000 that we had to purchase and distribute, and we are still doing that over the summer. However, it is also true that teachers went from, at least in Baltimore City, where we did not have a system-wide kind of focus or push on technology, within the span of a week, we stood up over 10,000 Google Classrooms that had previously not existed. And that came from our educators digging deep. That came from educators mentoring and teaching one another. And the real power of that ability of educators to support other educators is something that in the midst of this crisis, we're now asking ourselves, how do we leverage that? The other piece that I think is really important is that the visibility we received in going to virtual learning also showed those pockets of success And what we realized was it gave both families increased visibility into classrooms and what was occurring. And it also gave, from a district perspective, the ability to see into classrooms that we hadn't seen before. Of course, there were folks who struggled, but there were amazing teachers who did fabulous things. And I remember, and I love singing the praises of Miss Fort, because one of the things, I remember going to a room, African-American teacher, 5th grade math, doing a fabulous job. Well, one of the things that happened with Miss Fort is she went from teaching just her 5th grade class mathematics to then teaching the 3 5th grade classes, mathematics at her school, to then teaching 5th grade math across 10 schools. And one of the things we were able to do in this time was be far more creative than we often are in the everyday grind of school. And one of the things that we were able to see is that with one teacher really taking leadership around the upfront, it allowed other teachers to come around and really go deeply on some of the small group work. And some of those teachers to really be able to say, this is great, somebody else is doing up front. Now I can come and really address Sonia's needs, who might not have, necessarily connected. So within the pandemic, I have to say, we've also seen opportunities to really leverage some great ideas and innovate in ways we couldn't. All of that being said, I just want to echo what is true for Prince George's in this respect is also true for Baltimore City. We have not reached every student. We still probably had about 10% of our students that did not officially log in, that we had to go out and find. We had to work with community organizations, with community leaders. We even had our educators very bravely, in some cases, despite some of my protestation initially, going door to door. And I talked to a lot of principals from the communities who said, Dr. S, these are our kids, and we have got to find them. So one of our learnings from this year that we are putting in place now is how do we take some of that learning and put stronger safety nets in place to make sure we're touching and connecting with all of our students and connecting those students to learning. I think one of the pieces, I'm trying to make sure that I'm staying within time, that I also want to talk about is really what we saw and what we have been seeing is that those classrooms, those schools that had strong relationships between adults and students and strong relationships between school and home have by far been the schools and the classrooms that have fared the best, even in these unprecedented times. And the signal for us was, and folks who know me know, I love teaching and learning. But I will tell you, what was so clear to us was that the teachers, the principals that had taken the time to really emphasize relationships and relationship building were the ones that had the connections, that carried families, carried teachers, carried school communities through this time. And so, our signal has been, relationships have got to be first. They are the foundation of all we do. And then absolutely we want the connection for teaching and learning. But one of the things that I often say is, why do we ask either or questions in cases where we need to be saying both and? And so we shouldn't be asking some families. We shouldn't be asking Black families, brown families, families in certain zip codes, under-resourced zip codes, to make either or decisions. We should be giving them both and answers. And so part of what we are really trying to organize our return around is, how do we continue to support the building of these really strong relationships, even through a virtual setting? And we know, our teachers have told us, they're going to need more development and more support in those areas. The other piece that I do want to touch on, before I get the signal to end, is that the convergence of the virus with the racial protest has really exposed very directly Black pain in ways that as educators, we have to be prepared to respond to when we go back to school in whatever form we return to school. And so part of how this was brought very clearly home to me was in some conversations with some of our students who had engaged in protest, and I think rightly so. They were doing what all of us would have wanted them to do, and that is to be able to advocate for themselves and to advocate on behalf of their needs. But I think as adults and as educators, the charge I have really taken to heart is how do we make sure that we are signaling to our young people that they are being heard and that we as adults are willing to hold ourselves accountable for some of the change. And what was interesting is a young lady, I think she was a senior in one of our schools, said during, when I did the debrief with them a couple of days after the protest, she said, I know a lot of what we were asking for had to do with curriculum and studies, and we knew that. She said, but I have to tell you that a lot of what we are seeing is a lack of the same kind of follow through with adult behavior that people want to see with student behavior. And they began to recount to me instances where they felt differentiated treatment in a negative way in schools. So, at the same time that it's easy for us to march around police brutality, I am also very aware of my responsibility to not just point fingers at another agency, but to also reflect on what do we need to do in our own house as educators, and how do we situate ourselves to be able to address some of that. And young people are going to need to see it, not just hear us say it. And that is part of the work we're doing now, is thinking through how do we continue the support on the intersection of these challenges at the same time that we are preparing to reenter school, whatever that looks like with the crazy changing national landscape. The one piece that remains constant, whether we go back all virtual, hybrid, all in person, regardless, we are still going to need to be prepared and ready to allow our young people the space to process and the support to do that, both emotionally as well as academically in their own study. So this has been an amazing time, a trying time, but a time where I think if we really push our systems and our notions of how schooling has to be, that there is great potential to actually move forward. And I will just end with this story that has haunted me and stayed with me throughout this. We had about 20 young people, 20 Baltimore City public school students who were incarcerated. They are part of Eager Street Academy, which is one of our schools. And one of the things that became true is Mavis Jackson, who is our fabulous head of guidance, she's only been here a year, she and the principal worked to offer enrollment for each of these young people in 2 courses at Baltimore, at the University of Baltimore. And what we found after the period of time was that these 20 to 22 students, incarcerated youth, had one of the highest collective GPAs in these University of Baltimore City classes as any group of high school students in any of our high schools, including some of our entrance criteria schools. And one of the things in debriefing with these young people that they said was that that experience in distance learning at University of Baltimore was some of the most rewarding, rigorous, and engaging learning they had done in 12 plus years in Baltimore City schools. And as happy as I was, as joyful as I was with that amazing success, I was also conflicted because, and the conflict comes from the question that frankly kept me up many a night after that. And that is, why are we not doing more of this? And what would have happened if these young people had had that kind of liberated learning before they got involved with the law? And could it have actually prevented some of them getting caught up in some of the incidences that they were caught in? And that has been kind of the driving force for me to continue to ask, even in this time, how are we doing our work in a way that is centered on the needs of young people, is centered in the needs of their communities, and is about not just the longevity of a school, but the actual legacy and future of our communities. And so with that, I will turn it back to you, L.I.V.E. Great to see you, by the way.
Yeah, good to see you again as well. I mean, we were actually introduced last year through Education Trust.
Yes.
And you shared about the work, what you were doing with the foundation, with your teacher fellows and working with the community and making sure that there was a pipeline of teachers going through Baltimore City, effective teachers in your district. And so we were all excited about the work that you were doing there. Tonight has been phenomenal. I can't tell you, and I want everyone in the space now to really appreciate what we're getting, because from Dr. Goldson to Dr. Santelises, the information that they are sharing, you won't be able to get this anywhere else. To have these two phenomenal, incredible, outstanding leaders of leaders share with us intimately how they are moving their districts. So many other leaders are struggling with what to do. But what you all are sharing with us tonight is we jumped. We made some mistakes. You were very transparent. This didn't work as well as I wanted to, because the goal is always 100%. And I love that about you. Your goal is everybody. It's not either or, it's both and. I'm going to steal that. Everybody, y'all will hear that again. It will be Santelises said, it's no more either or, it's both and. Because we're going to make sure equity and access is for all of our students. I'm going to bring up Dr. Goldson. We're going to have our opportunity for bring your own voice. I mean, we have questions and people are commenting, people are sharing. You just don't know. We are really breaking the internet tonight. And I'm so excited, because when we do that, that empowers our educators, who then empowers our parents, our communities, and ultimately our children benefit from it. So I'm excited about all the participation. So I'm going to give you all a couple questions. Okay, the first question I want to start with is lessons learned. Okay, no, she's put that up there. Can we create a blueprint for whole child and whole family model?
So I'll start. Hey, Sonia, great job. And I get inspired just by hearing my sister friend in leadership. I think and I think Sonia probably would agree. I think what we have to do is realize we could create a blueprint, but every child and every family is different. And the needs, depending on where we are in our community, are different. And what we have shown is that we have to create a playing field that allows us to come up with a plan that's true equity. When you create that one plan and then everyone thinks that you can't deviate from that, is where you get a situation where there's no equity. And people can't move past those black and white lines and go into the gray area. It can be done, but you also have to know that you're leading from heart, and that you're trying to close the gap regardless, and you're willing to go outside that blueprint.
Right. And I think what you said earlier is that when you talked about what was equity and you provided that definition, you made it very clear that was what equity was for Prince George County. It may not be the same in Baltimore City. It may not be the same in Houston. It may not be the same in Nashville and Miami. That's what equity is for you and your school district. So the blueprint can be available, but at the same time, you'd have to edit it and apply it based upon the needs of your current situation.
Definitely.
Dr. Santelises, you want to give some comments around that?
Sure. No, I would agree. Dr. Goldson's right. I would agree, and I would just say that I think another component
of this need to customize is the importance of hearing from the community and the neighborhoods that we are serving. And so before I went without any, out with any blueprint of anything, I had to spend time actually hearing what did families in Baltimore City want for their children. It wasn't about me kind of coming in and saying this, that, and the other. It was about me listening and then saying, okay, these are some things I think we can lever. And I think that just builds on the point, that Monica made with regard to, sorry, Monica, I'm shifting between Dr. Goldson and Monica.
Girl, can you just say Monica, Sonia? Because, we're not used to this formal thing.
I know, it really is funny. I had to consciously say Dr. Goldson because when I called
No, we're family. When Dr. Goldson came in, she said, well, Sonia will be here. And then she said, oh, Dr. Santelises. No, we're family. Please, we want you all to be who you are. We're good.
Good. But
the next question we have is, what lessons learned during the distance learning this spring can be applied to improve learning in the fall?
One thing you mentioned earlier is we did a survey of our teachers, of our administrators, our students, and our parents. And we're using their voice and the lessons learned from the spring to make changes for the fall. What we do know is that synchronous learning worked great for our elementary students, and our secondary students did not get as much synchronous learning as they wanted. And so we're going to have to make some changes so that their experience is a lot more interactive than it was this last March till June. And we had a modified day during that time because we had to quickly ramp up. And we were also in the middle of the pandemic, didn't know what we were experiencing. We know in the fall that we're going to have a full day of that distance learning experience to make sure that we're closing that academic gap.
Oh, good. Dr. Santelises?
No. And I would say similarly, the feedback that we reviewed is that, at one point, families were incredibly appreciative of the quick turn and the lift that educators made, that we made as a district. But the other thing that was also clear was, as Monica just said, the variability, right? That had some parents who were like, oh, my child gets to see and meet with their teacher every single day in a synchronous learning environment. And there were others who were like, well, we get a phone call, right? But it's posted. And to teachers' credit, they came out of this year saying we clearly need more opportunities for professional learning. And so that's one of the things that we have really prioritized, is making sure that teachers get the support because they want to be successful as well.
Yeah.
And you sort of mentioned about prioritizing. So let's talk about that question we have here. Using an equity lens, how should districts prioritize resources to support differentiation based on current student needs?
Yeah, so first you got to establish what your gap is and how that gap hinders your ability to create equitable opportunities for all. And once you're able to do that, I think it fluctuates per district. So as I said earlier, we were able to galvanize enough technology, but what's a computer if you don't have Wi-Fi access? And so for us, we quickly had to ramp up and figure out, so access became a priority for us. And so you have to figure out what that is in order to begin to prioritize how each piece connects in order to meet the needs of your community.
Okay.
No, absolutely. And I would only, add that what we're seeing is, and it's going to be challenging in the environment we have, because we have to first and foremost attend to physical safety, right, of staff and students. But similarly, when we can, we have to plan for the fact that virtual learning doesn't work the same for every student, right? And not every student, and let me tell you, I have 3 daughters, and I can tell you all 3 of them experienced virtual learning very differently. And it was not solely because of an access to internet, because they all had a device and they all had internet, but it was the way that they interacted. So I think part of what we're also trying to do, and I know our principals are doing, is saying, okay, who are the young people who we know just did not connect in this way? And something different? Who are we prioritizing for more in-person service? So that if, within some schedules, it might mean that certain students have to get queued up for more time. And, oftentimes people like equity until it looks like somebody else is getting more. And then they don't like equity anymore.
Right.
So, some of it is going to be having, conversations because, as Monica was, referencing her English language learners, we have similar challenges in Baltimore City, and particularly with our students with disabilities, right? We know that there were a number of students who we have to make up services for. So this idea of prioritizing resources is going to require us asking some of those hard questions.
Okay. We know that, we can't ignore the elephant in the room. Elephant in the room. What we gonna do? What we gonna do? What we gonna do?
What we gonna do? I'm gonna tell you now. That's the question I call Sonia and say, what we gonna do? And
What
she
we
calls
gonna
me and say, Monica, what we gonna do? We'd love to offer as many options as possible. But there's so many factors that go into the decisions that we all have to make. Probably one of the hardest decisions that I believe we'll be making in years to come, because you have to build in health and safety, academics, personnel, so the capacity of your workforce to provide options. So it's easy to say we'll provide a hybrid model and a virtual learning model and another model. But all of those things require the capacity of our workforce. And we can't ignore, for me, 27% of my personnel staff are in the high risk category. And so I don't ignore that. As said earlier, I listen to the voice of my staff. Sometimes it's not always in agreement with what maybe our community members would want us to do or what we feel is best. But there's so many factors that go into this decision. It's why we can't just flip the switch and go out in front and say, this is what we're going to do tomorrow.
Right. And I hate to interrupt you because you just said something to me. And you said that 27% of your staff members are considered at risk. Two things. Number one, what are you defining at risk? And that says that you wanted to know about your staff. I don't know how many superintendents can tell us the percentage of their staff members that are at risk, and how are they modifying their reopening plans to accommodate those that are the at-risk staff. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Actually, I'm a data person, as you heard, math person, and so I reached out to our HR staff and our benefits office. One looked at how many employees were over the age of 55, and then what were our top 5 ailments that we tend to pay out the most financially for our organization, and were those top 5 part of the category that determines high risk. And from that, we're able to extrapolate what that percentage was for our population of employees. And how many of them potentially
taking notes. I hope they're taking notes. Because that's
and
important.
how many would potentially apply for the CARES Act leave. So that's another factor that our federal government laid on top of it.
And this is data that they should already have in their districts, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Dr. Santelises, tell us what we gonna do.
After I finish calling Monica, I will let you. But I do think, look, at this stage, and I had a town hall with close to 2,000 parents and community members today, right? That we had live exchange beyond our surveys. And, I will say this, that I think continuing to have honest conversations about where we are in this. And, somebody texted me today during it and said, I'm glad, you have your mama voice on today, because I did, right? There's just something that there's no need of perpetrating. Like we have a string of answers that we don't have. What we have are plans. What we have are scenarios. The goal, as Monica said, and I keep saying this, within Baltimore City, is to provide as robust a set of options for families as possible, because families are in different levels of comfort. However, it is hard work deciding what level of qualifying conditions come into play. And some of that is not easily defined in the CARES Act or right? I have teachers sending me pictures, not because they have a compromising condition, but they might have a 7-year-old child who has a compromising condition. And so how do you take that into account? And it just means that, and this is what I tell my staff. I was like, look, we are in the case study of the century on adaptive leadership. We are going to have to adapt. There is no book. There is no course in graduate school that prepares us. This is the application of every skill you currently have in real time. But the considerations, they are definitely there. But I don't have it. I'm going to wait for Monica to get it, and then she's going to.
And I think you touched on the point around the mental health. We talked about the Black pain, those things that are being exposed, those things that we did not consider initially. But as we are returning, we already know about the trauma. Right now, we're dealing with the people that are coming post-traumatic to returning to the schools and it's reopening. So how are you planning? I think Dr. Goldson said something about a mental health facilitator at every campus. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we both are in the state of Maryland, and we're blessed to be able to have a legislature that supports our ability to have mental health providers in our schools. And we have some funding that we can access both in Baltimore City and Prince George's to help to bring mental health providers to our buildings. But we also, Sonia said something really key. I was in the waiting room just clapping my hand. Relationships are key. And teachers are the first line of that relationship building, which is why we're providing professional development at the reopening of school on trauma-informed care. Because they're going to be, our teachers are going to be the first line of identifying the kinds of support that our children need. Now, of course, I know our teachers will say they got to do it all. And they really do it all, but they do it and do it with a style and flair that allows kids and families to feel comfortable to come to them first in order to be referred to a mental health practitioner for that additional layer of support. But you can't do that unless you've been equipped with the skills necessary in the trauma-informed care PD. So we're starting that along with the distance learning professional development that we're going to need to ramp us up for the reopening of school in August.
Okay. Dr. Santelises?
Sure. No, what I would say is similarly, and I have to give my academic team full credit because we had some days of professional learning for educators at the end of what was an incredibly long and trying school year. And they were wise enough to sequence some of those professional learning days so that the day that was focused on culture building, social emotional learning, landed on Juneteenth. And so to offer, and they did a fabulous job. I can't take any credit at all. They did a fabulous job really connecting with the variety of entry points for educators. For some educators, it was about what they personally had gone through. For others, it was about preparing to receive young people and what that needs to look like in a classroom. And I think that was the day we had some of the best reviews or best feedback from teachers. And I will also say we partnered with community grassroots organizations to try to lift that kind of learning. Our folks did a great job reaching out. And the reason why I remember the Juneteenth is because I had a couple of teachers say to me, man, that Juneteenth session sold out. Are you having it again? Right. And they appreciated being able to have time to process some of their own experiences. And frankly, were much better prepared for the virtual learning professional development day that followed because my team wisely sequenced in a way that allowed teachers to have some time focused on those, kind of that personal connection piece. So we're learning from that, and we're going to build on that as we get ready for the school year as well.
Awesome. I'm telling you, everyone is enjoying all this information that you're sharing. And I think there were some pieces there that were a little slow, but I think, I say we're going to break the internet. And I think we kind of did that for a moment. This is the last question here. Has a dialogue or network been started between the Black and brown superintendents? I know that there's a lot, and I know that the superintendents have the Superintendent Association as well. Is there an opportunity for Black and brown superintendents to continue that work?
So always, this is why Sonia and I are on a first name basis. We call, there are not many of us. So it makes it easy to connect no matter where we are in the US. We all are experiencing some of the same things. And so the bond that's established between leaders when there's so few of us is so tight knit, and there are always opportunities. Such as this, we reach out honestly to each other a lot, because you're walking this journey by yourself. It feels like you're walking it by yourself sometimes. But even across the U.S., there are platforms for us to do that. The Council of Great City Schools is an amazing organization that helps to establish that network and platform. And even if you don't qualify as one of those, because one of those districts, as Prince George's does not mean I still don't have access to the same resources and networking that exist.
Okay. No, last question. I said that was the last question, but this is the last question. I'm sorry, Dr. Santelises, go ahead.
Oh, no. You go right ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll give this last question to you because they're telling me last question. Okay, last question. What kind of PD options do you are provided, which are grounded in anti-racism and equity?
Yes, and for us, we really launched in last year to the beginning of our equity work, our equity training. We are so incredibly blessed to have Dr. Tracy Durant leading that work in our school district. We started out with a very explicit racial equity policy that our board championed, and it was important, at least for the Baltimore City context, that we began explicitly with racial equity, and with the foundation of really getting community support behind that policy, really launched this year in earnest a lot of our professional learning. Now, the piece in terms of where we are is we started out with educators volunteering. Now the question is to the folks that have not volunteered, right? And so how do we create, and I see Principal Davis from City chiming in, and she is a great example of a school leader that prioritized this for her school community. And what we've heard, particularly over the last few weeks, is we have to really ramp that up. So, we're adding to Dr. Durant's staff and really offering things even this summer. A lot of our leaders of color have been part of that equity network, as well as other leaders as well, not just that. So we're really in the thick of ramping it up, but we are also very much at the beginning and still have a long road ahead. But we have started, and Dr. Durant is just a rock star right now in Baltimore City because of the work that she's doing in this area.
Awesome. And I think one of the key points that you made is that this is something that you established years ago. It's not something that you just started in the middle of the COVID. You saw the need.
That's right. Right.
We want you all to hold on. We're going to now transition into our opportunity to share our thanks to you. Miss Simone is going to come in and she's going to share with you a little token of appreciation. And after Simone, we've got Keishla coming.
Dr. Goldson, I'm more PGCPS proud than I have been tonight. Thank you for leading the way. Honestly, I could say so much more, but I am thankful and grateful to be working with you. And so on behalf of the L.I.V.E team, we want to present this certificate of appreciation to you. Thank you for being efficient, effective, and efficacious, for leaders across the world. And so thank you so much. Many blessings to you. Continue to to shine the light and continue to do a great job for what you're doing for us. So thank you so much to Dr. Sonia Santelises. Thank you so much. I didn't know that you was a superintendent of Baltimore City, but I am so grateful that you two ladies are close in contact, are making a difference from Maryland. I'm originally from North Carolina, but to be a part of the Maryland school system, I am excited. And so on behalf of L.I.V E, I thank you so very much for what you do. Thank you for being efficacious, efficient, and effective in leading the way. And God bless you as well. And more grace to both of you ladies to continue to lead and do an amazing job for equity for all students, especially for Black and brown students. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've got people coming in, Dr. Santelises and Dr. Goldson. Do not leave. We want to make sure that we debrief with you in just a second. But Keishla, tag, you're it.
All right. Well, guys, I hope you all enjoyed tonight. It was absolutely phenomenal. We had 2 African-American superintendents sharing with us. And guess what? It's not over. It's over for tonight. But it's not over. We will be here throughout the summer, every Tuesday and Thursday. Coming up next Tuesday, we have Dr. Renata Hedrington-Jones. She's going to come talk to us about trauma-informed care in the urban classroom. So be sure to join us next Tuesday. And then on Thursday, my girl, my Sarah, Miss Rachel Broussard, will be coming to speak with us on culturally responsive teaching in the virtual classroom. I know there's going to be some good information. So don't forget to join us next week, next Tuesday and Thursday. We will be here throughout the summer for free summer session, summer learning. Also, be sure to grab the survey link that is in the comments and complete the survey and provide us with your feedback. As you provide us with your feedback, your name will be entered into a drawing for a Visa gift card. So we definitely look forward to hearing from you. And we'll go ahead and acknowledge our winners from this past Tuesday. So our first winner is, oh, she's a regular, Dr. Labata Taylor. She should be a part of the L.I.V.E crew, probably. All right, and let's see who our second winner is. Darlene Pettit. All right. Well, congratulations, Darlene Pettit, and congratulations to Dr. Labata Taylor. But before we close out, I'll bring the L.I.V.E team back in. Again, guys, thank you for joining us. Be sure to catch us next week. We have so much more important and in-depth information that we want to get to you. And so thank you again, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Fight against them, but we need numbers. We need to show up at school board meetings. We need to show up at county commissioner meetings. We need to have someone on the agenda to talk and know what they're talking about to advocate.
So that's the whole goal, just to be better, to come with the new knowledge, come with the new awareness,